Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the first 2022 episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. Happy New Year, my friend.
Yes, Happy New Year. Excellent to see you again.
Good to be back, man. It's not a Friday morning without sitting down with you I don't drink coffee, but I was gonna say sitting down for a cup of coffee with my friend Martin, bright and early on Friday mornings. And as we were just talking, it is the first snowfall in New York today. We've got about 1.5 inches of snow. It's still coming down. It's winter, I think.
Yeah, wow. We're excited to see that here, but right now in Toronto, it's just bright sunny day. It's cold, but it's sunny. But yeah, there's a lot of storms brewing apparently.
Have you had any snow yet at all?
Oh yeah, we've had lots of snow.
Okay, so it's old news for you already.
Out west, my parents are in Trail, BC, so the interior BC, they've got over 2 feet of snow right now.
Woo,
and the ski hills looking good for opening and having lots of snow. So
wow, well, that's the season. We're here in New York, we seem to the last decade or so, and whether this is global warming or not, I don't know, but normal winters back when I was younger, by late November, early December, it was already winter, snow was happening. And by, end of February, that's it, done. Beginning of March, spring is here. Yeah. Now it's the real winter doesn't start till early, mid, sometimes late January, and then it lasts until the end of March.
I agree. So, yeah.
December was like a cakewalk here. I mean, December was it's kind of cold for a couple days, 55, 60 for another. It's whatever. Yeah. So this should be normal. So I'm but it's kind of pretty out. When my Huskies are loving it, I will tell you that.
Nice.
They're running around the back. So we've got today. So we asked recently of all you viewers for ideas for future shows, not just for this show, but for Hudson Valley Squares and in the Prague Seat. And you guys have responded with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas. So we will be mining that from time to time and picking out topics to talk about on the various shows we do here on Sea of Tranquility. Today's episode, as a matter of fact, is one of those. So thank you to the viewer who asked us to talk about some of our favorite 2-album bands. In other words, these bands that kind of they released 2 studio albums, and then that's it, they're done. And we actually found there are quite a few of them. So we're going to each talk about 5 of them today and a couple of honorable mentions. And I personally like all the ones that I've chosen quite a bit. I think there might be a couple on my list that Martin doesn't care for, but that's okay, because it might be vice versa as well. So we'll have Martin.
One or two of those, yes.
Yes. I think you do. So we'll have Martin start with his first selection of the day.
Okay, so this is one we definitely can still agree on, that's for sure. I'm going with Philip Lynott, good old Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. He unfortunately only ever got around to two studio albums, right, as a solo artist. And oddly enough, I mean, one of them is 1980, the other one is 1982. This one's 1982. And then he was back and he made one more Thin Lizzy album after this. So who knows what would have happened had he not died? He died a few years later, but was it going to be Grand Slam for sure? Could there have possibly been another Thin Lizzy album? Definitely, I think there would have been. I think he would have gone back to Thin Lizzy. I don't think Grand Slam was turning out to be too magical a situation. And all it takes is money and a label and somebody to say, hey, you got to put Thin Lizzy back together and put yourself back on track. I'm sure we would have seen Thin Lizzy albums, and I would have bet we would have seen more Phil Lynott albums. But love these 2 albums to death. I don't even know. I don't even think one of them I like more than the other. They're so varied. They've got some good poppy Thin Lizzy type stuff on it, and then stuff that is way sort of mellower and more acoustic, a little bit of funk, a little bit of reggae. But on the first one, you've got things like Dear Miss Lonely Hearts, gorgeous, gorgeous song. Same with Girls. And then some great mellow songs on here as well. King's Call, about Elvis dying, right? Child's Lullaby. And on this one, you've got some even more adventurous material like Fatalistic Attitude, Old Town, Kathleen, just gorgeous, well recorded, huge stars, great musicians playing on them, a little bit of Water, Ode to Liberty. So this one has probably mellow songs that are as good or better or more masterpieces really than a lot of Thin Lizzy mellow songs even. So I'd love these 2 albums to death. Philip Lynott, there you go, first choice.
And both those album covers, he looks like a superstar, right? I mean, that's rock star written all over it. And I think one of the great, we were doing here on the channel a couple of years ago, we were doing a little series called the What If series. And I think one of the topics we never really covered was Thin Lizzy and Phil in general. It's like, what if he and Scott had cleaned themselves up and we didn't lose Phil, and we could have had a continued Thin Lizzy catalog and career and a very strong and prosperous Phil solo career. Kind of sad when you think about it, what could have been, right? I did a show on Tommy Bolin the other day, and that's another perfect example. I mean, these guys that just, man, they could barely made it out of the 70s. And, in Phil's case, he made it by a few years, but just not meant to be, and so talented and such a waste. Yeah, that's a good choice. Those are both. And I think those should have had more exposure too, because they're very varied. I mean, even if you're not a fan of like Thin Lizzy's brand of hard rock, there's plenty of material on those solo albums that I think would appeal to just about anybody.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So my first choice today is a little known band, but one of the guys came from a pretty prominent band called Warhorse. Right. So we're talking about Warhorse, self-titled 1970 and 1972's Red Sea. Okay, so for those who have no idea who the hell Warhorse is, Nick Simper, ex-bass player from Deep Purple, gets ousted from Deep Purple along with Rod Evans to make way for Ian Gillan and Roger Glover. He decides to put together a new band. He grabs lead singer Ashley Holt, a young keyboard player guy named Rick Wakeman. Okay, Rick would actually leave the band before they released their self-titled debut, and ironically enough, years later, not that long later, a couple of years later, Rick would, after he was in Yes, he would form a solo band, and he would actually grab Ashley Holt, who was the singer in Warhorse, and they would reunite in Rick's band. He would leave Warhorse shortly after they got together, before they started recording the new album, and he would join the Straubs. You got Mac Poole on drums. He would soon be replaced by Barney James on drums. Had a lot of changes in the lineup here. Pete Parks and Ged Peck both played guitar at various times in this band, and Frank Wilson replaced Wakeman on keyboards. So the self-titled debut, like I mentioned, came out in 1970. Very much in the style of Deep Purple Mark III, ironically enough. So it's almost weird that Warhorse and Red Sea comes out in 1972, that Simper decides to say, all right, because he could have taken the route from the first three Deep Purple albums, right? Very kind of psychedelic and poppy, but instead goes for the same route that his former band did on In Rock and Fireball and Machine Head. These are really underrated albums, and if you like, they sound so much like Deep Purple, it's uncanny. Even Ashley Holt's kind of high-pierced screaming and singing, very similar. Both these were released on Vertigo, major label at the time, but they didn't sell much. And the label eventually dropped the band. They disbanded shortly thereafter, reunited in 2005 briefly, but they haven't been heard from since. But really, really solid albums that if you just love that heavy Hammond organ guitar, early 70s proto metal hard rock type of sound, you can't go wrong with these. I like these a lot, and it's just a shame out of all the tons of Deep Purple offshoot bands that we had. I think these two albums are pretty unknown amongst many people, and I think they hold up pretty well. I like them a lot anyway. So,
cool. Yeah, funny you bring them up. We're just working on counting the votes for an Overkill Rewind Banger TV, and we're doing 1972. And Red Sea has got a few votes, which is good to see. And that's a case. I guess all of these 2 album bands, didn't carry on for various reasons. That's a case of one that it just kind of fizzled out and it didn't do well. And it's funny when talking with Olav Viper and I believe Nigel Granger. Who else did I talk to about Vertigo? Anyways, a few different guys about Vertigo, and there are some, they were saying that there are Vertigo albums that sold under 100 copies a piece when they came out. So they had some real low sellers, but they were a real sort of experimental, heavy, proggy label, a sub label, one of these cool little imprints situations. They're now legendary, of course. People love Vertigo and discussing all those bands. But yeah, a lot of them were just kind of stuck out there and didn't get a lot of promotion and didn't do that great. But yeah.
Well, Vertigo was famous for, they were labeled as the progressive label at the time, right? But a lot of these bands were kind of hard to classify because they were
Yeah.
kind of heavy. They were kind of psychedelic and proggy and folky. And at the time, there really was no kind of tag or label for all this type of music, but they were bands that were experimenting beyond the norm. And, it was either hit or miss which ones were going to kind of catch on with the general public or not. And unfortunately, Warhorse did not. But like I said, if you love early Deep Purple and you haven't heard these albums, you need to. Even the guitar playing is very much in the Blackmore mold. It's amazing how much that Nick and the guys went for that sound, which really was happening at the same time, because you had In Rock and Fireball were basically coming out at the same time as their two albums. So interesting how that happened, right? It's like cool. Both outfits kind of took the heavier route from the early psychedelic beginnings of Deep Purple.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So my second choice is let's see. What should we do next? Let's do this band. So Rex. There we go. Two records, 1976 and 1977. There's an original biography for the Rex album from 1976. And there's another promo shot. And here's their two records. So there's the first one, and there's the second one. Where do we go from here? So yeah, my story, to keep it brief, because people have heard this before, but I saw Rex, Bebop Deluxe, and Ted Nugent as my first major concert, Spokane, Washington. This album was out. Rex Smith had, like a trampoline, and he's doing flips and stuff all over the place. Good heavy band. And I remember that day or the next day, I think it was the next day, went and bought this album. There was a big, huge store display with all these, all red and stuff. Obviously it looks like kind of like a teen beat sort of album, but these guys were very much, they sounded like a good Aerosmith album. They sounded like a cross between Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, Sweet Evil era, Derringer, just all right in that sort of thing. It was heavy throughout, but rock and roll's the American hard rock heavy. Again, both produced by Eddie Leonetti, managed by David Krebs, which is kind of part of the demise of the band in a way, because what happened was, after this album, where the band wasn't really making it, this is what I call a peaks and valleys album, right? Remember, we've talked about that before, where the heavy songs are heavier than the debut and the lighter songs are lighter than the debut. So the debut's kind of going on at sort of a humming along at a 6 level of heaviness, and this has got a few 8s and a few 4s kind of thing. So it's a little more varied. But yeah, what happened was just one of those weird situations where there were some songs suggested, and this Rex Smith guy is really the star of the band. And all of a sudden Rex is in a movie and he's got a hit single, and now he's a solo artist called Rex Smith. And all of a sudden the Rex band is over with, and Rex Smith goes on to do 2 or 3 or 4 much mellower albums. He's a TV star and a movie star and a theater guy, and he has a great career moving on after this. But the version of the band that is a hard rock band, and they are a pretty hard rock band. Anybody who doesn't know those albums should check them out. But yeah, just the 2 records, and again, a whole different situation where the one guy is picked out to be the star and the rest of the guys are left in the dust. So there you go.
Yeah, I really like that band a lot, and especially the first album. But man, that album cover is terrible. It just doesn't portray the music that's contained in it. And I think for me, the one thing I don't like about the first, not too many cover songs. I know everybody was doing that at the time, but their original material was so good.
Yeah,
it's like they didn't need to do that. Yeah, I mean, the album covers it. You obviously know who they're promoting there, right? So
yeah.
But I like your.
Remember the ad that they had with this, and he's standing in front of a plane and holding a little model plane and stuff. Quite a memorable ad, but. Yeah, and just the whole idea of putting one guy forward, and the band's called Rex, it already feels like it's a solo project in a way, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you knew where they were going to go with that, without a doubt.
Oh, and we forgot to mention he's the brother of Michael Lee Smith, the lead singer of Stars, right?
That's right. Yes, I often forget about that, but yeah, that is true. But yeah, Rex Smith. I mean, wasn't he in soap operas too? I mean, he was all over.
Yeah. I think he was a doctor in a soap opera, and then was it Pirates of Penzance? But he had a couple of movies, and then that Forever thing. And I should have pulled out the rest of the albums. I've got them, but yeah, they're all just much more mellow, more AOR.
Yeah, he became a pop star. He became an actor. I mean, hey, you're absolutely right. He had a great career for himself, and I'm sure deep down inside he really didn't care that the Rex band took off, because he never looked back from there. I think it's the people who really like those two albums kind of missed that from a really good singer too.
Yeah.
So, all right, my next choice here, probably not one of Martin's favorite bands, but I like them anyway. The band is called Detective. And here we have 1977's Detective and 1977's It Takes One to Know One. They released both of them in the same year. They actually also went into the studio to record a third album in 1977 with none other than Tom Dowd as a producer, but the band basically never made it out of the studio with a new album. They broke up, and that was the end of the band, but kind of a super group. So you had Michael DeBar's, hold this up here. Michael DeBar's the singer, who was previously in the kind of glam rock band Silverhead, British singer. He has since gone on to become an actor and a stage theater guy, and had a very nice career for himself. You had keyboard player Mr. Tony Kaye, formerly of Yes and Badger, right? Tony, kind of a weird fit for Tony because this is not really a keyboardy band. Bobby Pickett on bass, and drummer John Hyde, and guitarist Michael Monarch, who was in Steppenwolf. So kind of pretty much a super group. A lot of buzz about them when they first came out. They get signed to Swan Song Records, right? Big deal. They're on Zeppelin's label, along with Bad Company and various others. But neither album really cracks the Billboard charts. Neither one of it makes the top 100. They go on. In fact, they toured with Kiss for quite a while during this particular year. That was getting them some buzz as well. They had the full backing of Zeppelin. Guys in Zeppelin were quoted in the press saying how much they liked Detective, whatever. But if you read some of the stories, a lot of drug abuse going on within the band behind the scenes. That didn't help matters. A lot of egos going on here. Like I said, touring twice in the studio, 2 albums. They went to the studio again with Tom Dowd to release a third album, and that wound up not having it. Andy Johns, by the way, produced I believe both of these other albums, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Steve Smith on the second album, Andy Johns on the first album. And the band implodes, never to be heard from again. And that's that. But I personally like the music a lot. It's very varied. I think they were wanting to be, and maybe the label was pushing them to be, another Zeppelin type band, not so much like Bad Company, which were obviously very bluesy. These guys were trying to go for, we're going to mix the hard rock with the, little bit of soul, little bit of funk. Think of some of the varied later Zeppelin albums like House of the Holy and everything after that. So you have 1 minute you have these really heavy songs, next minute it's a little more funky R&B type of stuff. I personally love the drumming on these albums. I think they were really going for that heavy Bonham type sound. I like DeBar's vocals. I always thought he was a pretty good singer. Not a great singer, but pretty good singer. I don't know. To me, good songs. I personally prefer the debut by quite a bit, but there's still some good songs on here. But I will say neither one is a perfect album by any means, but there's enough on these albums for me to recommend. But a band that just kind of came and went pretty quickly, actually. So there you go.
Yeah, I was always sort of the opinion. I mean, once you get a thought in your mind like this, it's hard to get it out. But to me, they always just seemed like these befuddled, confused bands without really a direction. I always put them in with Mott, the 2 albums without Ian Hunter, the 2 Mott albums, the two again Widowmaker albums, right? I think there were just 2 Widowmakers, right? Yeah. To me, it sounds a little bit like the not great stuff from Presence and the not great stuff from In Through the Outdoor, and then maybe even the slightly not great stuff from Pictures at 11. They've got a bit of that to it. And then the Firm, it also reminds me a little bit of the confused direction of the Firm, and frankly, the Outrider album of Jimmy Page. I mean, it fits in this whole, you're right, this modern day Led Zeppelin thing. And then also that modern day Led Zeppelin thing is a little bit, Desolation Angels and Rough Diamonds Bad Company as well. That all kind of fits in there. So that, the R&B and the funky and the varied and all that stuff. So yeah, it just didn't really go over well. And you could tell, they were trying to go for the big blocky later Led Zeppelin sound on it as well. So.
Yeah, it's another example too. And we've talked about this from time to time. Maybe it warrants doing a whole show on it, but this whole idea of the supergroup, right? And sometimes when you throw these folks together who come from different backgrounds, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I think in this instance, it kind of works throughout these these albums, but you're right, it is pretty inconsistent, and it sounds like this puzzle that, where you took a couple different puzzles and threw them together. Obviously, you can't finish it because they're from different right? And yeah, I mean, I have a couple others that I'm going to talk about, which are very similar situations where I think it really did work, but you knew it was never going to last, type of thing. But this, yeah, it's I think it had potential, but maybe the pieces were just too much of a different fit, right? Square piece and a round hole, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, but I like them enough. But yeah, not a perfect band by any means.
Yeah. Plus a dumb second album cover and a dumb second title, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is horrendous. Yeah. First of all, what they, they're trying to show that they're cool and suave, and
yeah,
it takes one to know one. What does that mean? I don't know. Yeah.
All right, so let's do one for Pete that he definitely doesn't care about, I'm sure. So let's do the Dead Boys. Great Cleveland via New York City downtown, heavy, egregious punk band. My favorite American punk band because they were so heavy. This is the 1977 album produced by Jen Uravan. Look at that. Look at that band shot, eh? Overkill, I believe, covered, right? Sonic Reducer. But yeah, it's just heavy, well, really raw produced, but sounding quite good. But they only made that one album for Sire Records, and then the other one for Sire Records, which is called We Have Come for Your Children, although I've pointed this out to Cheetah Chrome from the band, and he was quite amazed. But my record itself says Down to Kill, not We Have Come for Your Children. And they are, speaking of detective, Stiv Bators there, who died later, complications of a car accident in Paris quite a few years later. He had Lords of the New Church after, which was a really cool band in itself. But he's looking kind of suave here. And this is much more well produced. It's glossier. It's a little poppier. This is produced by Felix Pappalardi. Remember, he got shot and killed by his wife Gail later on. But yeah, you see a couple of the guys a little more dressed up. So they're moving into the post-punk phase. This is 1978. Still a great album. Great production on it, good varied songs on it. It's got the Son of Sam song on it, Catholic Boy. But yeah, the one, probably the best song ever about, the whole Son of Sam situation. But yeah, they only made the two albums, and, that's a little bit of that whole indicative, punk, whether you broke up or whether you became much different from a punk band. A lot of bands only did put out one or two albums because punk came and went pretty fast.
Yeah.
In England, mid 75 up through around 78 or whatever, and then bands were kind of moving on. But the Dead Boys, yeah, just the two albums. Stiv was off on his own. He does this album that looks way more punk than that, called Disconnected, but it's actually way poppier and way more 60s rock and roll flavored. But those two are absolute classics because, again, if you were a metalhead, there weren't that many heavy punk albums to speak of, really. When you add them all up, there were less than 20 in the golden era, and Dead Boys had two of them, kind of thing. So there you go.
It's funny, you look at that album cover, the second one there. It almost looks like either they or the label were looking at some other albums like by the Police and Cheap Trick, and kind of very similar looking there. Yeah. If you were to look at that picture right there, they don't look like a punk band there at all.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to fast forward to 1987 for me. I'm kind of doing mine in chronological order, I guess. Again, back to this whole supergroup thing. This is another one. Only two albums. I really like this band a lot. And again, sometimes you get all these egos in a band. Things just don't work out. Bad English. So we've got this album, self-titled, and we've got Backlash, which came out a few years later, 1989, 1991. So really the band were around for about 4 years, give or take. Pretty much a supergroup. Once again, you got a bunch of guys from the Babies. You got Jonathan Waite on vocals. You got Jonathan Cain, currently in Journey at the time, also ex-Babies. You got Ricky Phillips on bass, formerly of the Babies. And then drummer Dean Castronovo, who at the time was pretty much an unknown, but now obviously we know who Dean is. Dean has done lots of things, including being in Journey and all sorts of other projects and things like that. So they released this album in 1989. Obviously, Journey still pretty big at the time, although Journey are on a little bit of a break, right? Steve Perry's doing solo stuff, and Neil is off doing solo albums and guesting here and there, and they decide to put this band together. This goes double platinum, has a huge hit single called When I See You Smile. Band goes out on tour. I saw them on this tour. I thought they were great. Again, kind of a meeting of the Babies and Journey. Big riffs, lots of guitar solos, the big soaring vocals, lots of ballads and anthems and all that kind of stuff. Very slick production, really good album. Band rides the wave, right? They go back into the studio. They record Backlash in 1991. Based on what you read, it sounds like the band had already parted ways by the time they even released this, so they never toured for it or anything. This basically hits to number 72 on the Billboard charts, doesn't certify, no hit singles, so the band is basically forgotten at the time. But from what you read, apparently you had a couple guys in the band who wanted to get heavier. From what I read, it's Ricky and Neil, and then specifically John wanted to do more ballady, mellow type stuff, more pop, which is not surprising if you have followed John Waite's career kind of since. But I like these albums. If you dig the Babies and Journey, hooks aplenty all over the place, lots of memorable songs, lots of great guitar playing, great vocals. I was pretty upset when this band kind of went away, but that's the way it goes with these supergroups, right? So There you go.
Yeah, if I were to rank, I would go late period Jonathan Cain Babies, then I would go John Waite solo, then I would go Bad English, and then I would go early Babies. I know that's a little controversial, and it's kind of the reverse of when we did the ranking show on the Babies, right? Yeah, right. We did that, but yeah, I just love John Waite. I mean, it's just, and some of the solo stuff like Ignition is just almost probably the best thing he ever did. Like those first couple of
super talented guy. Yeah, without a doubt. Super talented guy. I'm amazed that he's kind of like just disappeared from the spotlight for so many years now. Such a good singer. I mean, one of those guys that I think he really just wanted to push his solo career after he got done with this, and certainly after the Babies, he wanted to be this is my thing. I want to do my own thing. But you got to wonder if he would have like hooked up with another bunch of notable guys and done something. He could have, and it's a shame. It really is.
Rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, though.
That's what I heard.
He's got a reputation for being hard to work with, right?
Yeah, I have heard that as well. Yeah, I've heard he's not the nicest guy in the world, but that's just hearsay. I don't know. I've never met him, so I don't know.
All right, so my next choice, I'll go with one more just to get them out of the way. That Pete, well, I don't know what Pete thinks of this band. Maybe he likes them or knows them. I'm not sure. I don't know the history of this, but Joy Division. This is not a punk band. It's a post-punk band. It's a legendary band. This is now a legendary t-shirt right off of the first album. So the first album was Unknown Pleasures. This is the band that turned into New Order later. They're kind of like a minimalist post-punk, dark, creepy new wave band. Very simple drum beats, sometimes heavy, sometimes kind of buzzy bass, sometimes, a little kind of like, it's definitely moody and mysterious stuff. But then they only made the one other album, Closer. But in the meantime, Ian Curtis hangs himself on the eve of going on their first North American tour. So he dies, I think he was 21, 23 years old, very young anyways. And it was actually just before this album came out. And so they only made the two albums. This was finished and they were just about to go on tour, but they're a legendary band, obviously, sadly, somewhat because of the notoriety of Ian Curtis committing suicide. He had depression issues. He was going through relationship problems. But those are the two, these are quite, collectible albums now. My first one is a Factory Records, UK original, but this I bought in Canada. So that's a Canadian one. And then, shortly thereafter, they put out these still, live and compilation gatefold. It's all the ink on it is kind of, it's all stamped, right, and a little bit embossed. And you had these things were inside the Factory Records had this kind of really cool simple aesthetic that they did with all their stuff, but absolutely legendary bands. So yeah, Unknown Pleasures was June 15th, 79. Recording of Closer is March 18th. May 18th, Ian Curtis commits suicide of 1980. Closer comes out July 18th, 1980, and the Still double album comes out October 8th, 81. So quite a story there. And then New Order goes on to massive fame. They become a really big band. But Joy Division is just so beloved and so kind of creepy and magical. And they had a very, very unique sound that nobody else was doing at the time. So there you go.
Yeah, I've never listened to them. I've had people
Okay.
talk about them to me for years and years and years. I probably just need to go listen to those because yeah, it's weird how such a short time that they were together, and yeah, tragic.
It's very simple and hypnotic music. You might not like it. It's definitely because I remember doing I did a history in 5 songs podcast 2-episode thing on You Had to Be There and You Didn't Have to Be There, right? This is one of those maybe you had to be there things, because you might play it and go, if you weren't there at the time and soaking in these albums and the story of his suicide and all that stuff, you might just go, this sounds really rudimentary, because it definitely does. But, like I say, it's a lot of that whole AC/DC less is more thing, where you get some really interesting synthesizer sounds, some distorted bass guitar sounds, some heavy guitar once in a while. You get his dreamy sort of laconic vocals and really kind of moody lyrics, and just simple arrangements all throughout, but a lot of different things they tried. But it's only 2 albums, so it's pretty easy to check out.
Yeah, I'm going to listen to them. I have this feeling I might not like it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better to at least experiment with something and check it out, and whether you like it or not, whatever, right? So yeah. All right, let's see. Moving up, well, right around the same time here. So another kind of supergroup band formed in 1989, only released 2 albums. The first one came out in 1990. We're talking about Damn Yankees. And 1992, Don't Tread, the second and last album. Of course, this band features Tommy Shaw on lead vocals and guitars from Styx, obviously. Jack Blades on bass and vocals from Night Ranger. Ted Nugent, of course, solo career in the Amboy Dukes on guitars and vocals, and drummer Michael Cartellone, or Cartellone, however he says his name, who at the time was kind of an unknown. Of course, now we know he afterwards moved on to Lynyrd Skynyrd, and he's been a long-time drummer for Lynyrd Skynyrd. But first album comes out in 90, hits number 13 on the charts, goes double platinum, right? This is a pretty big seller, huge hit, High Enough, right? Which was every band around this time, right, Martin, had to have one of those power ballads, and that's your big hit, even if the rest of the album doesn't sound a hell of a lot like it. But a fun album. You got all of the kind of the characteristics of all the members, especially the main 3 guys, coming out full force. You got Shaw and Blades trading vocals. Nugent does a little bit of vocals on here as well, but mostly he's playing lead guitar. You got Shaw doing some lead guitar as well, but a really fun, good, hard rocking. I don't even know if I don't want to call this a hair metal album, but it's from that time period, again, right at the end of that time period. It's just a good, accessible hard rock album. And if you like the more accessible commercial stuff of Night Ranger and Styx, I mean, basically that's what you got here. The second album comes out in 92. But, by then, band had already been out on tour. They played live with Bad Company. They did that big tour. I saw them on that tour. It was I thought they blew Bad Company off the stage. By the time they come out with this 2 years later, this only makes it to number 22. It does go gold, but no big hit singles. I think by then already, most of the general public have moved on to grunge and alternative, right? That's it. This is right at that period. These guys came out. I think if Damn Yankees came out in like 87, 88, this does even bigger business than it did at the time. But, again, going by the guys in the band, they were going to be a big seller regardless. But band breaks up. Nugent decides, I'm just going to go back to my solo career, because they were going to do a third album. And Shaw and Blades decide to do the Shaw Blades album as a kind of continuation of this. Then they both decide to go back to Night Ranger and Styx. And basically, that's that. They've been talking about a reunion, possible third album for as long as I can remember, but still to this day in 2022, that has not happened. But to me, 2 really solid records, good, just rock and roll, hard rock, whatever. It's pretty catchy, good guitar work, good vocals. I think they're fun albums. So I would love to see a reunion. But
yeah. Yes, and they are a super group, and you're right. Grunge takes over, and I think those both are squarely hair metal albums, but not only are they swept aside in the hair metal getting swept aside thing, but these are guys from the 70s and the early 80s and stuff, right, as well. So they're from a previous generation. I've had 3 of those guys, tell me fairly at length about the mythical shelved third Damn Yankees album, right, and how they were basically figured out that none of them liked the songs or whatever, and they just said, we're going to knock this on its ear or whatever. So
yeah. Oh well.
Okay, my last one is a band that I'm sure Pete does know and appreciate, Ram Jam.
Oh yeah.
So there you go. That's what they look like. This is a crazy story. I won't go into it too much at length. I've actually done an entire History in 5 Songs podcast episode on just this strange, I think I called it the strange saga of Ram Jam or something like that. But they're essentially kind of an assembled band. They have a massive hit with Black Betty off of this. It's a total novelty song. It's just kind of like this redone, almost Zeppelin-esque, weird, percussive, beautifully recorded, really groovy, strange song that is just, it's almost like a Bohemian Rhapsody of the blues, and it couldn't fail to be a hit. Yeah. But it's the only hit off this album. The rest of this album to me sounds like a little bit of a dated cross between like heavy BTO and heavy Foghat sort of thing. It's 1977. They're on Epic. And then what happens is 1978 rolls around. They get a guy in the band by the name of Jimmy Santoro. Hang on, let me just make sure I get that because the funny thing that happened, I was looking at this. Yeah, his name is spelt wrong on here. It's Santoro. It's Santoro. He's now like or I don't know about now, but years ago when I've talked to them and I wrote up the whole story of this and stuck it in a book. But he was a school teacher later. But when he was brought into the band, and this is all by the Castanets Cats song doctor team who kind of owned everything, and that whole thing is a big sordid story as well. But the crazy story about this album, which doesn't look like it, but this is one of the heaviest albums of the 1970s to come out of an American band. This is like a cross between Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, and Judas Priest, really. It's quite heavy throughout. It's really raw. But Jimmy was the guy bringing all that really heavy stuff to the band. And the Castanet Cats team actually had them working on 2 separate albums at the same time. One was going to sound more like the bluesy rock of this, rounded off Buffalo Burger rock, I call it. And one was coming up with this more modern, really heavy metal version. And they decided, let's put out the heavy metal one. It kind of broke up the band. Mike Scavone ends up in jail for drug trafficking. This is the crazy story. So the album is, the band is more or less kaput at this point because Mike goes off to jail for a long time, and they basically don't get to tour this legendary heavy album, and it's not promoted and it goes nowhere. It has no hits because it's just way too heavy. And it sounds nothing like the first one. But yeah, Mike, eventually reconnected with him and interviewed the other guys in the band, and Mike became like a prison parson. What would you call it? Chaplain. Prison chaplain in prison, and then he went on to have a very successful life as a running an insurance company later on. But yeah, so there was this big drug trafficking thing that happened. So the lead singer, who's very important to a band, of course, is off to jail, and the band is no more. But yeah, you get these 2 albums where the first one's actually a pretty cool, heavy album, quite useful. But the second one's a drop dead classic, really good. And I swear my favorite song on it is actually not even one of the most technical Judas Priest type songs on it. It's the one called Gone Wild. And it is so kind of like Southern rock, Ted Nugent, kind of redneck, rowdy, bush party rock and roll. It's just gorgeously recorded. The vocals are back. The drums are booming. It's just, to me, I've often said it's the rowdiest sounding song I've ever heard. So go check out Gone Wild on YouTube, and that'll be your entry point to that record.
Yeah, I really enjoy both of those albums, but you're absolutely right. They almost sound like a different band. I mean, from one to the other, but they're both really good for what they are, what they are. And I don't know about you, but Black Betty is one of those great songs that whenever I hear a band covering that song, I don't mind because it's just such a great song, no matter who plays it. It's you know, we talk so much on the channel here about you know, cover songs and how people do the same songs over and over and over again. It's like, please stop covering that song. If anybody wants to do Black Betty, it's okay with me. I remember like saw Pat Travers a bunch of years ago, and he played like a 10-minute version of Black Betty. It was absolutely amazing, and it just reminded me how much I love that song. But yeah, that second album is really, really heavy. But I like your comparison to like Ted Nugent, because I find a lot of that album, and even some of the first album, has that kind of like, you know, we always say that early Nugent has this kind of almost like heavy Southern rock type thing, even though he's not from the South. And I find a lot of that on those albums as well. But I think the second album has more of like a Montrose type of crunch to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's
and you know, as heavy, literally there's 3 or 4 songs on here that are as heavy as anything you will hear out of an American band in the 70s. So that'd be like Just Like Me, Hurricane Ride, Pretty Poison, and Runway Runaway. All like really, really heavy, like super heavy Ted Nugent kind of thing. Like I say, a little bit of Judas Priest to them as well.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. My last one for today, another supergroup going up to 2008. So this one's fairly recent. The band is called Chickenfoot. Self-titled debut comes out in 2009. And then the weirdly titled Chickenfoot 3 comes out in 2011. No Chickenfoot 2. I don't know. Kind of bizarre how they did that, but I guess that's original. For those of you who have not heard of Chickenfoot, and if you haven't, where have you been hiding this last decade or so? Sammy Hagar on lead vocals, obviously from Montrose and Van Halen and Sammy solo. Joe Satriani on guitar. Michael Anthony on bass and backing vocals, of course, from Van Halen, and Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So big profile band. I mean, when these guys formed, I think a lot of people were waiting for Sammy to do something else, join another band. We all love the combination of him and Michael Anthony, and they're really, really tight. So that was kind of a no-brainer. The addition of Satriani, I think, was kind of interesting because Joe was known as mainly a solo artist, right? So how's he going to work within a band confines? And then you got Chad Smith, who, you know, drummer for a very, very popular active band in the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that's, you know, again, you got these guys from all these different places, so to speak, but it actually works. This album comes out, does really, really well. Good. I'm of the opinion I like Chickenfoot, but I don't think I've listened to either of these albums in 8 years, maybe more. I don't know. But really good to hear these guys coming together. The music is not overly heavy. There are heavy spots, but it's just good, fun, Montrose-y type of, you know, hard rock, but maybe not quite as memorable, I think. But Sammy sounds great on these albums. It's interesting to hear Satriani doing more of, you know, playing more for a band, more in riffs and things like that, and not, you know, obviously we're not doing instrumentals here. So I kind of like these. I think maybe they didn't quite live up to the potential. But of course, they run into problems because they want to tour. I think the guys in the band really want to make this like a full-time thing. But Chad Smith proves to be the problem here because he's got so many other responsibilities and commitments that obviously bring in a lot of money with Red Hot Chili Peppers. Whereas, you know, Sammy and Michael, this is their gig. Satriani has a pretty good gig as a solo artist, so he's another one. So they get Kenny Aronoff to fill in on the tours that they've done. They play live quite a bit, but they released the second album in 2011. Doesn't quite do as well as the first, but still does pretty well. They put out a live album as well. And we've been hearing nothing but talk of them potentially getting back together in the years since, but we've seen nothing since. So at this point, it's now been a decade plus. I think we've probably seen the last of Chickenfoot. I don't think the world is crying too much about it, but I think if they were to come back, people would be into it, obviously, because you know, Sammy still has the vocal chops. People still love Satriani. Michael Anthony is a great talent. He needs something to do, and whoever they get to play drums, I don't think it really matters. So yeah, there you go. Another super group gone after 2 albums.
Yeah, I'm kind of reading between the lines of what you're saying, and I'm agreeing with the part between the lines where it's like I wanted to love that band a lot, but I just don't think the songs are there. I think, frankly, it hurts Joe Satriani's reputation as a songwriter because I don't think the songs are there. That's kind of the problem. It's just not that memorable, right?
Yes, it works in spots. It works in
Yeah.
spots. I find the albums enjoyable, but I when I listen to either one of those, I'm left saying, okay, that's pretty good, but man, that should have been better, right? That's it. To me, it's kind of like the detective thing all over again, where it's like, for me, like the Bad English stuff and the Damn Yankee stuff works pretty well. I think the Chicken Foot stuff should have been better than all of those, and maybe Satch was not the right guy for them. I mean, Sammy and Michael have moved on to other things since then, which I don't know if those work either, right? They've done those other albums with I forget the name of the other guitar player. I don't love those either. I don't know. I don't know what it is. They need to hook up with someone who I think is a really, really strong songwriter. I mean, because look, Sammy had Eddie and he had Ronnie back in the glory days of when he was doing some premium stuff. And I think that, Joe is a great player. He knows how to write great, catchy instrumental songs that are full of guitar. I don't know if like being in a vocal band is really his forte, so to speak. I don't know. But like I said, I like Chicken Foot. I want to love him. I really want to love him. And I think there's like untapped potential there, which at this point, for them to get back together, I think is kind of pointless. I think they should have struck while the iron was hot back then, but now it's kind of past, I think.
Yeah. All right. You want to hear a few honorable mentions? I had a few other ones that when I was doing this, Badlands is one I thought one of us would have covered, but I guess we've talked about Badlands a few times right before. Yeah. UK is another one like that I feel like, I can hear my own voice in my head.
Yeah, that's why I
about UK too many times, right? So UK had the two plus the live albums. A live album. Badlands had the two plus the later unreleased came out again. Sex Pistols sort of counts, but because the Great Rock and Roll Swindle sometimes consider that, but it's not really. But it did come out relatively soon on Virgin, but it's just a hodgepodge album. One I almost wanted to include is John Paul Jones. I think he only had the two solo albums, and they're actually kind of cool. Witchfinder General. They fit in that category of two albums before, but then they came back way later with a really compromised, not great album. So technically it's not really a two. Then I was thinking of people like Fight, Rob Halford's Fight. Oh, yeah. They only had the two, War of Words, Small Deadly Space. Tin Machine only had two albums. Right. Yep. Rossington Collins Band. Great Southern rock band, only had two albums. Sugar, Bob Mould. The Firm only had two albums. Again, Chicken Foot situation all over again, right? Walter Becker. This is just from the long list that I sort of in the research. Traveling Wilburys, Amy Winehouse, Sir Lord Baltimore, I guess if you don't count a later one. Ginger Baker's Air Force. British Lion, because doesn't Steve Harris have two of those now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right, I think. Mott, who we talked about, so a different band from Mott the Hoople. Widowmaker, we talked about. Spies with that Foreigner offshoot situation. Alias and Power Station, which I don't know much about or care much about either, but apparently these are two album bands, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of mine, and I will throw Blue Murder out there.
Oh yeah.
I forgot, and that's another example of they had the it thing on that first album, and then that kind of fizzled, and John Sykes took too long to kind of get the next one out, and then by the time that next one came out, that next one is really not that good. The second album, Nothing But Trouble, and I'm looking. Jellyfish only had two albums, right?
Not sure. Could be. It's funny when you say Blue Murder, you could probably, if you really, really dug, you could probably find 5 hair bands, who came late in the hair band thing, and they only got the two out, and then hair metal was over, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, basically, so yeah.
I bet you could find that. I bet you could find a lot of 2 album grunge bands who also kind of came late in grunge, knocked out the 2 albums, and then it was kind of all over for that scene. So it's funny why, all the different reasons as we went through all these bands, like they all had varied reasons why it was only 2 albums, right?
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of prog bands too. Like one, Sebastian Hardy comes to mind. They were an Australian prog band from the 70s. They only had the two albums. I was correct. Jellyfish just had Belly Button and Spilt Milk, so they only had the two albums. And yeah, you mentioned Rosalind Collins in UK, which were I didn't want to talk about. We talked about UK so much. I'm like, I'm gonna leave them alone. But the funny thing is, especially some of the bands where we mentioned where the results were kind of disappointing, like Chickenfoot, The Firm, Detective, and a bunch of other ones that we mentioned. If you take like the best songs from those albums and put out a double album, you probably have a great album. But like on their own, a lot of them are hit or miss, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And well, maybe it's by the second album, like everybody was looking, meaning the fans and the label and probably even the band themselves saying, I guess we don't have any magic here. So,
and yeah, right. I mean, that's, and a lot of times, especially when you got like bringing guys in from other bands, the ego always kind of plays a part. But yeah, if you don't hit it by that second album, whether you're a brand new band or a super group, usually that's kind of time to call it quits. So, oh well. So there you have it, everybody. Our look at some notable 2 albums and done bands, and that was kind of fun, something a little different. So keep the ideas coming. For those of you who are wondering where to put those ideas on the channel, when you're on the desktop version, when you're on the channel, there's the tab that shows home and videos, and then I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. Community? Is that what it's called? Jesus. I'm drawing a blank. Yes, yeah. Hold on, folks. I will tell you in a second. Community, yes. There is a community tab. I think it's the third one from the top. Go there. I have a post where I've asked people to just post comments of ideas. There's a few hundred of them there now. So that's what we're going to use going forward to kind of look through to get some additional show ideas. So please continue to put those in there. They are looked at, but just understand we're not going to get to everybody's ideas. So, and a lot of them have been already done. So what I ask everybody is to please look on the channel first before you start typing in a paragraph of what you'd like to see, because I saw quite a few that we've already done these ideas. So, but thanks everybody. And Martin, what's going on the podcast, on the Contrarians, and what do you got in stock that's ready to ship?
Yeah, the podcast. So History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. I'm up to episode 132, and I'm trying to think of what this last. Oh, it's about drum hooks. That's right. Was my last one? Drum hooks, and then we had dubious cover version decisions and cover versions that helped elevate albums. So those are the last 3 episodes of that. Contrarians, we just did a worst album episode on Rush, and that got a lot of heat. That's for sure. Of course, as you could imagine, Rush fans are definitely very militant. And book-wise, there's been nothing new lately. But the funny thing is, I added it all up, and as we get into 22, I've now got 6 finished books that are just sitting at the next phase that are either getting laid out or designed or printed right now. So I've got 6 finished things moving forward, but nothing new for the last little while. But yeah, martinpopoff.com for all the books.
Cool. So Martin doesn't know this yet, but he's going to find out right now. So Craig Kaminsky and I are planning on doing a ranking the top 10 books of Martin Popoff over the next week. So that is coming.
Wow,
so, yeah. Well, that is good, because we were both talking, and he's got like 30 something of your books. I think I have like 40. And so we were like, why don't we do a top 10 of our favorite Martin Popoff books? So that is actually coming. So
nice. Very cool.
And it's weird because I look at, I have a lot of the really early ones. I have a ton of the more recent ones. And I'm like, there's some that I haven't read in a long time, but I think I'm like, all right, because your books have, you've done like different types of books over the years. Like early on, you did a lot of these kind of like compilations in years in metal and all that sort of thing, and books on certain styles of music. And whereas it's been more band centered in more recent times. So it's going to be interesting for me to rank what I prefer, because I really got used to the early stuff, but now I've been really into the latter period stuff that's very band centric. So it's gonna be hard, I think, for me to pick out my 10 favorites, but it'll be a fun exercise. So
yeah, every publisher beats me over the head and says general books don't sell; they have to be band centric books. And I've noticed that even when I was self-publishing a lot of sort of generally kind of books. But so all the half of my catalog that is general books are the half that are the worst sellers, and the half that are about bands are the best sellers. And oddly enough, the ones that have sold the best have been on small bands. It's been the stuff on more obscure bands, not the huge bands.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Like for instance, like with
Merciful Fate, Max Webster, Montrose, Riot, Accept, UFO. I guess it's a little bit bigger band, but the Blue Oyster Cult stuff's always done well. So yeah, just anything. Angel, Sweet, all of those have been through reprints, right? So all of that stuff. Whereas Ted Nugent did okay, but Megadeth didn't do great. I don't know if the Metallica did great for the big, those are plush, big coffee table books. But I know, for example, I don't think the Pink Floyd or the Metallica did huge numbers. For my big awesome US publisher. Rush always does well. Rush,
how about Sabbath? And maybe because some of these big bands have
Sabbath have done okay too. But again, also I think a lot of these books I put out when there were way less rock books out in the world, and certainly less books on these bands. So even some of the huger bands I've done books on, I was like the first or second person to ever do a book on those bands. And now there's many books out on those bands. But yeah, it's pretty cool to see that people really have a thirst for the stuff on the smaller bands.
Yeah, well, because there's not much out there. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Do you is that Riot book still in print?
Yeah, Riot's still in print. Montrose, all of those are now moved over to my UK publisher, Weimer. So.
Okay, yeah, the Montrose book is great. I like that one a lot. So cool. All righty, so everybody stay tuned for that ranking the books. Instead of ranking the albums, we're ranking the books of Martin Popoff. That's coming up fairly soon. So stay tuned for that. I'm sure Martin will get a kick out of watching that. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. And Martin, you better get your stock ready, because I'm sure once we do that show, people are gonna be like, I never read that book. I gotta go order. I gotta go order.
Cool.
It's out of print.
Awesome.
Damn. Yeah. Oh no.
That's my main thing. My main job is the mail order, the signing and mail order and shipping of my own books, right? So
yeah. And Martin does an interesting thing. So like when certain books are out of print, you actually go and search to see if you can find some that are out there available to then go, because I mean, you got people that are asking for them, right?
Oh yeah. Begging for them at kind of big amounts, right? So it's like, if I see them out there in the world, I got to pick them up. And the other cool thing I learned by doing that, and just being a book hound anyways, is I've often thought there was once in Toronto, there was actually a full bookstore dedicated just to music books, right? And I know when I go through a huge rack of music books, I know which ones are long out of print and sought after and desired out there. And I think, well, why am I not buying these 30 books right now? I know I can resell them for a lot of money, right? I'm not talking about just my own books, but I just know music books, right? It's like, I got to use this knowledge one day somehow,
Cool. So there you have it, everybody. So stay tuned for another episode of the Funhouse next Friday. Martin and I will be back at you once again next Friday morning. So till then, have a good weekend, everybody. Stay tuned for album homework assignment this Sunday. We've got Stephen Reed going head to head with Neve the Progner. That should be lots of fun. And of course, Monday starts the week all over again with the Hudson Valley Squares and everything else afterwards. So for Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. See you next time here on the channel. Bye-bye.